Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be about my birth story and also like some of the complications with my pregnancy. So to start off, I had like a pretty normal pregnancy. Like I wasn't like high risk or anything, but I did like end up going to the hospital a few times. So the first time was in March. I found out I was pregnant in February, so like I wasn't really that pregnant, but I was like really sick. Like I had the flu or whatever, and I just like couldn't get over. Like I was sick for like a week and I had a really high fever, so my mom was like, "Okay, like just go to urgent care." So I went to urgent care and then the doctor there was just like, "You're pregnant. Like I don't know what to do for you. Like you have to go to the emergency room because you're pregnant, so I can treat you here." So I was like, "Okay." So I went to the emergency room and I waited there forever. And finally, like, I would go back and the doctor was like, "Okay, like I'll test you for the flu." So they like put this test and they like test me for the flu. And they're like, "Yeah, you have like the worst form of flu. So we'll just like give you like a little Z pack and you'll be fine." So I ended up staying home like that whole week because it was like horrible. I've never been that sick before, like with just like a cold. But that wasn't too bad. Like I got over it and it was fine. And so the rest of my pregnancy was like pretty normal. All my doctor's appointments were normal. And then when I was like 6.5, almost 7 months pregnant, I had to go to the emergency room again. But like throughout the whole pregnancy, I was getting like a lot of UTIs. Like I don't know why, I just like got like 4 of them. So yeah, I was just like getting a lot of UTIs. And so one morning I woke up and like my stomach, like bladder area, like kind of hurt. And so I was like, "Oh, like maybe like I just have another UTI." So I told my mom and she was like, "Yeah, you probably just have another UTI. Like if it still hurts by the end of the day, like call your doctor and make an appointment." So I was like, "Okay." And throughout this whole summer that I was pregnant, I took care of my little sister a lot because we just like had fun all summer. So like she was always with me. And so throughout the day, like it still kind of hurts. I took some like Tylenol and I didn't really think about it too much. And so like it was probably around 3 o'clock and I was like, "Hey, like we should go to grandma's house just to like get out of the house. She'll be home like at 4 or 5. I don't really remember." So my sister's like, "Okay." So me and her like go to my grandma's house and like on this like drive to my grandma's house, she lives about like 30 minutes away. Everything just like goes downhill. So like I start like sweating a little bit and I'm like, "Dang, like this hurts like a lot. Like I'm like in a lot of pain." So I'm like, "Okay, like whatever, I just need to rest." So we get to my grandma's house and my sister's like trying to play with me, but I'm like, "Hey, like I need to like chill because I'm in like pain, like I don't feel good. So just go play on your iPad, watch TV, like do something that like doesn't involve me because like I don't feel good." And so she was like, "Okay." She goes and does whatever. And I'm just like laying on this couch and I'm like dying pretty much. Like I'm sweating. I can tell that I like have a fever. I'm in so much pain, like to the point where I'm like crying. And it's just like not fun. And so my sister gets scared and she gets my phone and she calls my mom. And she's like, "Mom, like Joe's really sick. You need to come home because like she's not okay." So my mom's like, "Oh my God." And she starts freaking out. She's like, "Put your sister on the phone." So I answer, I'm like, "Hey mom," like crying. And she's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I don't know, like I'm just in a lot of pain, like I don't feel good, like I'm cold." Like I was shaking because of like how bad my fever was. And so she's like, "Okay, like I'll be right there." And she only worked like 10 minutes away, so like I didn't wait that long. And so as soon as she got there, she's like, "Okay, like you obviously need to go to the hospital." So I'm like, "Yeah, like you're right, like let's go to the hospital." So she drives me to the hospital and they like hook me up to like the heartbeat, the fetal monitors, and also they take all my vitals, and my fever was like 102, I think, something like that. And the baby's heartbeat was super high, like it's supposed to be 130, 140 in that area, and it was over 200. So the doctors were kind of like, "Okay, like we'll admit you right away, like there's obviously something wrong with you." And so they like take so many vials of my blood and they're like, "Okay, like we just need to put in an IV." So I'm like, "Okay." I'm like so scared of needles. And so the nurse that was doing it, I kind of just like am like, "Hey, just do it on the first one because I hate needles. Like just get it over with. Like I'm scared. Like just do it." And so then she was like, "Oh my God, like you're scared of needles? Like what? I've never done someone who's scared of needles." And I'm just like, "You're kidding, right? Like what do you mean you've never like worked on someone who's scared of needles? Like just do it." So then I think she like got nervous and she's like trying to poke me, and she pokes me like 4 times, and she's like wiggling the needle in my freaking arm trying to find a vein, and she like can't do it. And I'm just like looking at her like, are you serious? And my mom's like fed up, and she's like, where's like the head nurse? Like, you obviously can't put this in. Like, someone else needs to do it. So her boss comes in and she's like, what are you doing? Like, just give me the needle. And so the nurse puts it in right away. They put in an IV. They start my fluids or whatever. And they take 4 vials of blood and like 2 like containers of my blood. So they took all that and they're like, well, we have to wait for our test results. So like, we'll just give you a high dose of antibiotics now. So they gave me a bunch of antibiotics, and I'm in the hospital for like 4 days. And it turns out I had a kidney infection and a UTI. So that pretty much sucked. And then when I got home, they like gave me a bunch of Percocet, which I didn't even know you can give to like a pregnant person, but I took Percocet for like a week after that because I was in a lot of pain. But even then, the doctor's like, your baby's fine, like this was just more like a problem with you, like everything's good. So after that was pretty good. At like the end of my pregnancy, I was getting a lot of Braxton Hicks, and I'm like a paranoid person. Like, I'm like, every contraction I would get, I would be like, oh my god, like, I'm in labor. So we went to the hospital twice when I had Braxton Hicks, and they were just like, no, like, you're fine, whatever. So then I had my 40-week appointment, and they're like, you're like 1 centimeter dilated, like not too bad, like we might have to induce you if you go to 41 weeks, like we'll set you up an induction point at 41 weeks. So I'm like, okay. And I asked her to strip my membranes, which is like a way to like jumpstart labor. So she did that, and it didn't really like, it's supposed to hurt a lot, but it didn't really hurt too bad. And so nothing ever came of that. That day when I turned 40 weeks, I took my sister and we like walked a mile to try and like get my labor started. Like, I was trying everything because I had gained 75 pounds at that point. Before I got pregnant, I was only at 100 to 105-ish pounds, like around there. And at this point, at my 40-week appointment, I weighed 172 pounds. So I had gained like so much weight, like my back hurt. I was just like over this. Like, I'm like, eviction notice sent to the baby, like we need to get her out. So I was trying everything to like jumpstart labor. Nothing really worked. But then on Saturday, I was getting contractions like pretty regularly throughout the day. But then around 5 o'clock, I was getting them like every 7-ish minutes, around there. So I'm like, okay, like I want to go to the hospital again. Like, I think I'm really in labor. And so Bryce takes me to the hospital, and my mom met us there. And they monitored everything, and they're like, you're definitely having contractions, but we think that you're just like in early labor. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, when am I going to be in active labor? And they're like, it can last like around a week. And I was just like, a week of feeling like this? I was like over it. So I'm like, okay, whatever. And I asked the doctor, I'm like, can you just strip my membranes again? And she's like, yeah, but I'm going to warn you, like, I do it really vigorously. Like, it's probably going to hurt you a lot. And me thinking, like, I've already had my membrane strips. Like, it's no big deal. So I asked, she's like getting ready to do it. I'm like, okay, like cool, like it's not gonna hurt that bad. But no, she did it so hard, like it definitely hurt me a lot. I had to like scream to like stop because like I just like couldn't take it anymore. So whatever, I'm getting discharged, and now like after she stripped my membranes, I'm like getting like harder contractions. But they had just told me like, you're not in labor, like go home. So I'm like, okay, like whatever, it's still Braxton Hicks, I'm thinking. So my mom's like, okay, like let's go to Texas Roadhouse. So we go to Texas Roadhouse and we eat dinner. But like as I'm like sitting in the booth, like I'm getting like contractions like every 5 minutes. Like it hurts. Like these ones are like way worse than like I've ever had before. So I'm like, whatever, still Braxton Hicks. So like when we're leaving Texas Roadhouse, I'm like having to stop, and I'm like this little like huge valley, like like on the side of like the hallway, and like people are just like looking at me like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine, like it's just like Braxton Hicks. And everyone's just kind of like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah. So we go home, and we stayed at the hospital for like a really long time. So we got home and it was probably like 10 p.m. and my mom's like, okay, like I'm just gonna go to sleep, like if anything changes, wake me up. So me and Bryce stayed up probably until like 12. And I'm just like keep getting contractions, like they're really consistent. And probably like a normal person would have been like, yeah, like I need to go back to the hospital. But me was just like a stubborn person and was like, no, like I'm in early labor, like it's not active, they just told me that, you know. And so whatever. I didn't want to go to the hospital. And so around 12 p.m., 1-ish, around there, Bryce is like, okay, like, we should go to sleep and you need to get rest. So we go up to my room and, like, he's, like, asleep. And my contractions, like, I just can't go to sleep because they're so bad. So I'm just, like, laying there in pain. And my contractions weren't really too much in the front. Like, I just, like, had a lot of pain in my back. I had a lot of back labor. So, whatever. I'm just getting more and more contractions. And finally, at, like, 4 a.m., Bryce wakes up because my body is just, like, shaking uncontrollably. Not like, oh, like, shivers, like, cute. No, like, it is shaking, like, the whole bed uncontrollably. And so Bryce wakes up and he's like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I don't know, like, I just can't stop shaking, like, I'm in a lot of pain. And he's like, okay, like, let's go to the hospital. And I'm like, no, I'm not in labor. Like, they just told me I'm not in labor. Like, we're not gonna go to the hospital. And he's just kind of like, okay, like, if you want, whatever. And so he's just, like, trying to, like, rub my back, like, help me through this. And he, like, keeps asking me, like, let's go to the hospital, let's go to the hospital. I'm just, like, refusing. And he's like, I'm gonna go wake up your mom. And I'm like, if you go wake up my mom, I am going to be so mad at you. Like, don't do it because I'm not in labor. They just told me I'm not in labor. And so, whatever. He keeps rubbing my back. And so finally, at, like, 4:45, my contractions were really consistent at that point. Like, we weren't tracking them, but, like, they were just, like, nonstop, I felt like. So I look at him and I just, like, start crying. And I'm like, go call my mom. Like, we waited too late. Like, my contractions, like, are so close. And so then he's, like, kind of scared. And he, like, runs down the hallway, knocks on my mom's door. And I can, like, hear this because my sister was, like, at her dad's house. So it was just, like, us three in the house. So he knocks on the door. And she, like, is like, what? Like, half asleep. And he's like, Jalissa's contractions are so close together, like, we need to go to the hospital now. And my mom, like, I can hear her, like, fumbling, and she's like, what do you mean? Like, why didn't you wake me up? And so she, like, runs down the hallway, and I'm, like, sitting on my bed, like, crying, like, we waited too long. And my mom was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, my contractions are, like, 1 minute apart, like, we need to go. And so she's, like, scared, and she's, like, mad, and she's like, you guys needed to wake me up, like, it's too late, like, she's gonna have the baby in the car, like, why did you do this? And I'm just like, I didn't want to go. Like, I didn't think I was in labor, but, like, I'm definitely in labor now. And so it took me a while to get down the stairs and into the car because my contractions were just, like, nonstop. Like, it really hurt. And so even at that point, I'm like, we're going to go to the hospital. They're going to tell me I'm not in labor. And Bryce and my mom are probably looking at me like, okay, like, you're not in labor, sure. But anyways, so originally I had planned to go to, like, a hospital that was far away. It was, like, 30 minutes away across town. But my mom's like, no, like, you need to go to the closer Loveless hospital that's, like, 5 minutes away. So she calls them and she's like, yeah, like, her contractions are 1 minute apart, like, she needs to go to this hospital. And they're like, okay, like, just bring her up. So we finally get there and we go up and they, like, have, like, exam rooms before you get, like, an actual room. So I'm sitting in this, like, exam room. I have my little birth plan ready and, like, my bags are in the car because I'm not sure if I'm actually in labor or not. And so finally, like, they put the monitors on and they're like, okay, like, you're definitely having really consistent contractions. Like, let's check to see how dilated you are. So they checked me and I was 5 centimeters dilated. And so then they're like, yeah, you're in labor. Like, let's admit you. And oh my gosh, once they said I'm in labor, I was so scared. I was, like, crying and I was like, no, like, I don't want to do this. Like, no, like, I tap out. Like, I don't want to do this. And everyone's kind of just, like, looking at me like, you have to do it. Like, there's no way out of this. Like, you just have to do it. And I was just, like, crying. And so my mom calls my auntie, my grandma, and Bryce calls his mom. And I had originally planned for my best friend to also be in the room, but I just, like, wasn't even thinking of it. Everyone just, like, forgot to call her, which, like, I kind of feel bad about. But anyways, so, like, my auntie, my grandma, and Bryce's mom, Letty, like, they meet me at the hospital, and I'm, like, in my room. And at this point, I'm just, like, in a lot of pain, and the nurses tell me, like, oh, like, you can get in the bath, like, it might help you, you know, like, feel less pain. So I get in the bathtub, and Bryce is sitting, like, on the floor with me. Like, he's not in the bathtub, he's, like, out on the outside, but he's still laying on the floor with me. And, like, I'm, like, crying in the bathtub, and I just, like, stop crying, and I look at him, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. I want a C-section. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, like, tell them I want a C-section. Like, I'm done. And he's like, I don't think you can do that. Like, you can do this. Like, you're fine. And I guess my mom, like, overheard me telling Bryce that. And so she, like, went to the nurse's station. And they're, like, all laughing at me, I guess, is, like, what my mom tells me now. Because I was saying I wanted a C-section. Like, in a lot of pain. But, like, in my birth plan, in my birth plan, I specifically said, like, I don't want an epidural. Like, I want to do everything before an epidural. So the nurses come in and they're like, do you want an epidural? And I'm just like, no, like, I don't want an epidural. And they're like, okay, we can give you Demerol, which is like a pain reliever, but you can only have 2 doses in 1 hour, and then after that, like, you're done. Or we can also give you nitrous oxide, which is like laughing gas. So I was like, okay, just like give me the nitrous oxide. So I went to lay down in the bed, and also I had GBS, which is like a thing during pregnancy. It's like a bacteria that's like normally on a body, but during pregnancy it can like multiply, like form colonies or whatever. But like I had that, and so like they test every pregnant woman for it, and I was positive for it. And so they were like, okay, like you need to have antibiotics because if the baby gets it, like it can hurt the baby or whatever. So they started me on an IV of antibiotics for that, and I laid down in bed, and then they gave me the nitrous oxide. And the nitrous oxide like doesn't take away your pain like at all. Like I thought I was just like gonna be like good, but it was not. It just kind of made me confused and like unaware really of like time. Like I didn't know how much time was passing. And I also was like unaware of like why I was having this pain. Like I knew I was in labor, but I was just like this pain, like I don't know. It's hard to explain. It just kind of makes you loopy a little bit. And so I was on this nitrous oxide, and I was like laying down on my back in the bed, and I was a horrible like pregnant lady in labor. Like I was screaming, and I was like, my back is breaking, my back is breaking. And so the nurses like finally got fed up of it, and they're like, okay, like you can't lay down on your back because like obviously your back hurts, so like why are you gonna lay down on it? So my mom had brought like my big yoga ball that I had been using my whole pregnancy, and they put it on the bed, and I like laid my head across it, and I was like standing on my knees. And so when they put me in that position, it was probably like 8 a.m. And I was in that position for like a little while. And then finally the nurse came back in, and she checked me. She's like, okay, like you're 8 centimeters dilated. You know, like I'll come back in a little bit. But like as soon as she like walked out the door, like a few minutes later, I was like, okay, like I need to push. Like it's so weird, like this feeling. Like my body like just started pushing like itself. Like I didn't like consciously push. Like my body was just doing it. So I was like, okay, like I need to push. My mom was like, no, like you can't push yet. But like I was like, okay, but like my body was just like pushing for me like already. And so finally like my aunt like runs into the hallway, and she's like, hey, like she's saying she needs to push now. And the nurse was like, I just checked her, like she can't. So the nurse comes back in, and she's like, oh, you are 10 centimeters dilated. And so it was like 8:30 at that point. And so they're like, okay, we'll call your midwife. And the midwife comes in, and she like gears up. Like they have to like put like this whole like outfit on, like boots on and like crazy stuff. So she's like gearing up. She's like, okay, like, you can start pushing. And so when I was pushing, I only wanted my mom, Bryce, and Letty in the room. My water hadn't broken yet, so she broke my water. And my mom was on one side holding my foot, and Bryce was like holding my hand, and then there was like a nurse holding my other leg, and then Letty was like in the back of the room, whatever. She was staying quiet. And so finally they're like, okay, like you can start pushing. And poor Bryce, like I was like squeezing him, like he had like marks all over his hand, like where like I scratched him. And then at one point he like tried to take his hand away, and I like grabbed his shirt and like scratched his chest. Sorry. And so they're like, okay, like you can start pushing. And so I only pushed like a few times. It didn't take that long for me to like actually like push her out. And so she was born at 8:55. She was 6 pounds 8 ounces, and she was exactly 19 inches long. Yeah, it was amazing. I really loved my whole nursing staff. They were so nice. Yeah, I'm really glad I didn't end up getting an epidural either, because it was kind of like a natural birth. Like I still like felt everything pushing out. Like the nitrous oxide only took like 2 breaths before like it was like out of your system or whatever. So that was my birth story. So in a week, me, the baby, and Bryce are going to be going on a road trip together. We're going to drive to the Grand Canyon, and then we're going to head up to San Diego because my cousin is graduating. So I'm going to do another video about like my experience driving with a toddler and kind of like tips and tricks that I've learned to like, you know, help the whole process. So yeah, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.